So last week, New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing's Bernard Saunders was in our weigh-in studio, and this week it's the turn of NZRB CEO John Allen to give us a version, I suppose, or not a version, but his views on where the New Zealand racing game is heading. Are you feeling like you're a wee bit of a, I don't know, out on a limb at the moment in terms of this discussion?
No, I don't think we're out on a limb at all. I think all of us are working extremely hard to drive better returns for owners, better returns for jockeys, get more money injected into this industry. All of us are looking to do that in a way that's sustainable for the long term. And the conversation that's going on at the moment is really just about what are the mechanisms by which you do that most effectively.
So are you still as enthusiastic and interested in the Massaro Report as you were, say, a month ago when you said that you were when it was immediately announced?
I'm really pleased that we've had an external perspective on our industry. I'm really pleased that we've had someone who's prepared to put some stakes in the ground and say this is the way forward. I think now we have to pick it up. We have to work out how we make it most effective for the New Zealand context, and we have to work through the detail of implementation so that it can actually deliver long term for all of us.
Submissions are being made to the Minister via the DIA by October 19th. John, what is the NZRB's key points in your submission about the Massaro Report and the strategic future of racing?
So our key points are we do need more money, and we greatly support race fields and the abolition of the gambling duties so that we can inject more money into the sport. We do need investment in racing infrastructure, and so we strongly support the 3 synthetic track investment opportunity that Mr Massaro has advocated. We do think we've got too much racing infrastructure in New Zealand. We simply don't have the money to bring it all up to standard, and Mr Massaro has offered a view on that. Our perspective on that is that the clubs of New Zealand have to get involved in that conversation actively. The clubs in New Zealand and the codes have to own the solution. And that, of course, was the process that we've been working through with the clubs and codes over the last year. And then lastly, and then you come back in, but lastly, we do think that the option of outsourcing the TAB needs to be very carefully thought through, because the TAB is a significant asset for our industry. It's a valuable asset for our industry, and if we're going to give it away, we're going to have to, or give away control of it, then we've got to make sure that we're getting a very significant dividend above what the TAB could itself deliver.
The Minister said at the Harness Racing New Zealand conference on Friday that the race fields legislation has been dropped. That bill will not be going to Parliament, it won't be tabled, and therefore it won't be voted on. You were surprised by that. I think he indicated he wasn't happy with it, it wasn't fit for purpose was his words. Is there no communication, being perfectly honest, between yourself and the Minister for Racing, because he hadn't told you that in advance?
No, well, I don't know that he'd told anyone in advance of that particular decision, and perhaps he couldn't because of parliamentary process, I'm not sure. But the reason that I was concerned and remain concerned about that is because we need the money. The clubs need the money, and we need it now, and everybody supports this legislation, all the codes. We're all lined up on it. Parliamentary support, the majority of parties across Parliament support the legislation. Mr Massaro himself supported the legislation and said it's a key component of taking things forward.
So John, what's the problem? Why can't we have this passed and then start working towards the future? Because we need the money, and it's our money, and we should be getting it, but we're not going to get it.
So I think that's exactly what should happen. I think we should have had this passed.
Well, then, John, I don't understand this, and I'm not blaming you and I'm not blaming the Minister, because he is a very busy man. He is the Deputy Prime Minister of the country. Can you not ring Winston Peters and ask these questions? Has your relationship not been established at that level? Is there a breakdown in communication? Because you're in charge of New Zealand racing and he's the Minister for Racing, but you guys don't seem to talk very often.
Well, as you've said, I mean, he is extraordinarily busy. He's off a multitude of portfolios. He's got to lead his party in what is a reasonably complex coalition. But the answer to your question, do we talk? No, we don't.
So for me, as a stakeholder and as a person who owns racehorses, that's not good enough. Like the fact that you're the boss of New Zealand racing and you're not talking, and I'm not saying it's your fault or his fault. I know the Minister is very busy, but at this most crucial time in the history of New Zealand racing, I want the person who's in charge of it, which is still you, and the person who's guiding its destiny, which is Mr. Peters, talking to each other. How is this possible that you can't sit down like Sheldon and I do here, or you and Sheldon now, and discuss what involves hundreds of millions of dollars?
Which goes back to my original question, how do you not feel like you're out on a limb here?
Well, I don't feel I'm out on a limb here because what I'm saying is largely what the codes are all saying. I mean, we've worked together on the venue review, we've worked together on looking at options for outsourcing the TAB. There's significant work that is going on right now.
But do you feel like you're not going to get a say in this at all?
Oh, no, the Minister's said that we'll all get a say. The Minister's said, as was indicated, that we can make submissions. We will be making a submission. And I think that as I say, there is a high degree of alignment across the industry about how we move forward.
This is interesting, John. You mentioned submissions, and people out there have probably made their own submissions, clubs and organisations. Who's going to read all of these documents? Like a number off the top of my head, there must be at least 100 of them. I know 20 people who have made submissions, and you guys are making obviously a significant one. But the Minister is not going to read these. Obviously, he's a very busy man. I respect that. They're going to the DIA, who are going to, I take it, read all these submissions, and, excuse my ignorance, do they then filter a report through to the Minister on what they think should happen? And to be perfectly honest, is the Department of Internal Affairs the right people to be making judgments on the future of New Zealand racing?
Well, the Department of Internal Affairs is the agency of government that supports the Minister for Racing in his racing portfolio.
Okay, are you confident they can make these decisions? Because I'm not.
Well, I don't know that they will make decisions. What they will do is they will review the material, they'll assemble the material, and as you say, they'll report to the Minister. Ultimately, the Minister will make the decisions about which pieces of the feedback he accepts, which pieces of the feedback he doesn't. I'm sure that he will carefully consider that feedback. He has indicated he will, and I think it's really important because if people feel that their feedback's been listened to and been taken into account, then they're going to be much more willing to own and support the outcomes.
It feels like that it's the Minister that's going to make this decision at the end of the day.
Well,
the consultation and the to and fro is just piecemeal.
No, ultimately the Minister will make the decision. I don't know that the process is piecemeal. I think that the Minister has specifically asked us all to provide feedback. I think it is really important that everybody does provide feedback. I think it's critically important that issues such as outsourcing the TAB, as venues, and particularly the suggestion that the ownership of those venues might flow in some way to the ownership of assets, or the proceeds of assets might flow directly to codes under statute. Those sorts of issues are addressed by the racing community in New Zealand.
So you can probably view this a wee bit from a yard back because you haven't been involved in New Zealand racing for a hell of a long time compared to perhaps us. How does New Zealand racing look in 10 years in a perfect world if we take how much of the Massaro Report on board in your eyes, viewing it from where you are now and perhaps from where you will be in the future, which won't be part of it?
Well, I think there's two pieces of it. One, I think that the TAB will continue to improve its profitability. I think there is huge opportunity to grow the profitability of the TAB. And even if you just look at our SOI, our current SOI, we're looking to move from what will be a significant increase in profitability in the year just finished at an operating profit level to about $158 million. to $175.3 million in this season, to $200 million to $220 million. So that's the trajectory that the TAB currently has in front of us. So I think there's heaps of opportunity to increase the profitability of the TAB. I think there is lots of potential to do even more if we're able to get the benefit of the gambling duty abolition, if we're able to get race fields in place. You know, this is an industry that needs an injection of money. We know where that money can come from. We just need to get our hands on it.
John, I asked Bernard Saunders in the show last week, because we're talking about separation of the codes and separation of funding to the codes, what NZTR has done in the last decade to suggest it would wisely spend our money, because it's our money as stakeholders. Yeah. I want to ask you the same question. Has the New Zealand Racing Board's performance in the last decade been good enough to suggest they're the best people to spend our money?
Well, I can only talk about the last 3 years, which is the period that I've been actively involved.
But you must have seen the numbers for the last decade.
Yeah, I have.
Has it been good enough?
Well, not if you look at a decade level, probably. But what I'd say to you is in the last 3 years, I'm very confident that we have been good stewards of the assets of the TAB. We have grown those assets. We have invested for the long-term future. So if you just look at things, we've got high-definition OB vans being sent out around the country right now so that our product is presented on the world stage in the best possible way. We've grown customer numbers in the last year by 18%, which sounds modest, I suppose, to some, but is a huge achievement and gives validity to our view that there's real potential to get more Kiwis punting on our products if we present it right. And we've grown our profitability over the last 3 years. We're on the cusp of launching our fixed odds betting platform, which will revolutionise betting for Kiwi punters. So yes, I think we are good stewards.
So why, if what you're telling me is true, and I don't think you're lying to me, why is there so much angst, anger, and at some levels hatred of the racing board, or is it of the entire racing administrative machine? Because some people say it's your guys' fault, and some people say it's NZTR's fault, and in harness racing they blame their own administrative bodies. Why is there this drive to get rid of the racing board in your mind if you are happy with the way it's performing?
Well, I think there's some history here, not all of it which I know. So when I talk to people about that and those sorts of attitudes, they tend to reach a long way back into history to start validating and justifying their position. The second thing is, I think people forget that the racing board is not a group of sort of suit-wearing people living in Wellington in offices that are distant from racing. The racing board is actually the people in your TABs. It's the people on course supporting the clubs to get their jolly wiring and their TVs going. It's the people on course taking the pictures that enable our product to be sold around the world. So somehow we've got to reconnect the realities of what the racing board is and what the racing board does with the industry. And I don't think we've been very good at that.
Isn't the reality, though, isn't the reality we've actually got to reconnect people with horse racing in New Zealand?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, well, this is a very important economic question. The basic argument around outsourcing comes down to scale and the fact that the Australian TAB, who would seem to be the natural partner for us to get into bed with, have a bigger machine, they can use more scale, blah, blah, blah. We won't need a fixed odds betting program. It's very complicated stuff. Economically, do you buy into that? And if it is true, because you're not a lifer, we're lifers in racing, we've done it our entire lives, and you're a guy who can move on to be CEO of something else. If it's true, isn't it time we let it happen? Or do you believe it's not true, one way or the other? Because the problem is, John, the people who potentially have the opportunity to vote on contracts or looking into contract negotiations could be voting themselves out of a job.
Yeah. So look, the debate about scale is a legitimate debate. The way in which you achieve scale, though, there are plenty of options. So one way is to do the sort of licensing agreement that is being talked about, the outsourcing agreement that is being talked about. Another way, which is the way that we've been operating over the last few years, is to say we'll pick partners that are best in class to partner with for particular types of parts of our business, and we'll achieve scale in that way. The potential benefit of one over the other is simply that we keep control of the asset that is the TAB under the approach we're taking, and we don't keep control of the asset which is the TAB under the approach which is otherwise being taken.
I'm not going to argue that with you. I agree the asset should stay in New Zealand, but are we lacking in performance? Have we let the industry down? Because, John, a lot of people feel let down. Or is there misinformation? I heard the Minister say that racing lost $200 million, which is, I don't believe to be true. Is there a bit of misinformation out there about the actual numbers?
Oh, well, I've also heard around the traps the $200 million loss figure, which is absolutely not true. I've heard that we've borrowed $200 million or we're $200 million in debt, which is absolutely not true. The question, I absolutely accept that we need to be able to make more money. And I'm perfectly happy to look at outsourcing, so don't misunderstand these comments. All I'm saying is to make for a decision to be made to move ahead with an outsourcing transaction, you have to be really confident that that transaction is going to deliver a substantially greater dividend to the industry in the long term than the current TAB and its plans could deliver for it, because you're giving up control and because you're relying on a partner to continue to prioritise in the long term New Zealand racing over whatever other racing they're also going to be responsible for.
You talk about confidence, and a lot of people watching the show have mortgages and are pouring money into horse racing, and if this is a stuff up, they're going to lose their house or lose their job. When I hear about the Typhoon betting system, which cost us $20 million, and this is before your time,
Sure.
and we didn't turn the machine on, and we have a fixed odds betting platform program now which is behind schedule, how can I have any confidence that the racing board's the right people to look after my money if there had been mistakes of this magnitude in the last decade?
Well, because the partners that we've chosen to work with are amongst the best in the world. So OpenBet is a technology provider to virtually all of the major betting businesses.
Why is the fixed odds betting program behind schedule?
Because it's a large, complex project, and it's taken longer than anticipated to implement that program. It's not ideal, I get that, but look, the partners we've chosen are great partners. They're working incredibly hard, as are our team, to deliver this project. I'm confident we will deliver the project. I'm confident it will be a significant enhancement.
So you're confident you
punters.
deliver it by when?
Well, the date that we're working to at the moment is the 5th of December. We've talked about that publicly. I'd never say you can't get bumps in the night in these sorts of projects, but that's what we're working to. That's what the team are focused on. And we've got people in London, we've got people here, we've got people in Greece, because OpenBet have European networks working to deliver this for the benefit of Kiwi punters and the New Zealand racing industry.
John, take yourself out of this equation. Say you're the CEO of Fonterra or whatever, and you're looking at this externally at this place, this racing board thing. Are the people and the business structures inside the racing board smart enough to lead us into this brave new world over the next 5 years with unbundling of television rights, outsourcing? Have we got the right people to do that? Because if we haven't, shouldn't those people stand aside? What's your honest opinion if you were looking at this externally?
My honest opinion is that the people that we have in the racing board at the moment, and I'm talking particularly about my team and the people who work with me across the racing board, are amongst the best possible people you could have in any industry across New Zealand. I think they are absolutely the equal of other corporate teams that I have led. I think absolutely they have the passion and the commitment and the drive to deliver for New Zealand. That doesn't mean that we're perfect. It doesn't mean that we won't make mistakes from time to time. I think that within the codes, I've seen huge commitment. People have worked really hard and very collaboratively. We work together, despite the narrative out there that we don't. So, look, I think we've got the people in the industry to make this happen. I've just come out of the harness conference, and looking at the passion and the people and the clubs of the harness code, for example. We've got great people in the industry. It's not a problem with the people. It's a problem of getting a focus, deciding precisely what we're going to do and getting on and doing it.